People of the internet, welcome to Contentions. Tonight we are discussing abortion, a collision of perspectives. I'm joined by Cindy Plaza. She is on the pro-abortion side, and KayFellowz. She's on the anti-abortion side. And I want to let you know, if you're joining me for the first time, that this is an open platform hosting debates and discussions on contentious subjects. And I want you to feel welcome no matter what walk of life you're from. I'm stealing that from James and Modern Day Debate. So shout out to him. If you have a question for me or one of the participants for tonight, then tag me at Factitionless Network. Please keep it civil. Attack the argument, not the person. Insults will not be read. Violations of the TOS will get you kicked or banned. My guests are linked in the description below. If you like what you're hearing, please check them out and click their links below and hit the subscribe button because I have many more debates and discussions coming your way, hopefully. And with that, we're going to go ahead and get it kicked into overdrive. So let's go ahead and let you guys introduce yourselves. Kay, let you introduce yourself first.
So I'm KayFellowz. I'm a pro-life or ethical life activist. I've been doing anti-abortion activism for about 8 years. I am co-founder of an ethical life organization known as Protecting Life Through Ethical Accountability. I'm a wife, I'm a mom, and I'm looking forward to this discussion.
Thank you so much. And Cindy?
Hi, so I'm Cindy Plaza. I have a channel where I talk about critical thinking mostly. I'm also on Skeptic Haven, which is a channel that contains several shows, including Women Atheist Unload, where I host once in a while. I would say I'm more pro-choice than pro-abortion. We can discuss this later, but yeah, I'm really glad we can have this discussion, and I hope it will be great.
All right, great. So I do have questions prepared, and I did send you guys them beforehand, so you guys can have a chance to get familiar with them. I'm gonna go ahead and pull up the first one so we can just get that out of the way. The first question I had was, what is life and when does it begin? So I will answer that first. My answer to what is life, um, anything that is self-perpetuating, things that do anything that has that process like eating, breathing, uh, reproducing, and life begins at conception, in my opinion. So I will go ahead and let you guys answer that question, whichever one you want to go first.
I guess I can go first because I'm gonna kind of echo what Kaz said. We do have specifications that we go by in the scientific discussions about what is life. I try to stay within the parameters of the scientific discussion regarding life. And I would agree with you that I believe that life begins at fertilization. We do have an overwhelming consensus from biologists and embryologists that fertilization is when a new existing entity comes into existence.
Okay, Cindy.
Yeah, I think the discussion is a bit more complex because uh, many scientists define life as a process, not a state. Just like death, it's a process. Like for example, if you say at what point do we consider a person dead? Is it when the heart stops? When we know that we can revive people after their heart stopped? Is it brain function? But then if someone is brain dead, uh, but still actually breathing and heart beating, we still consider them alive. So yeah, life is more a process than a state, and I think the idea that a new being starts at conception is different than the question of is it alive? I don't know if that makes sense.
No, I see what you mean. In the sense of, is the being relevant to anything that matters to us, maybe.
Yeah, in any case, I think that this specific question is irrelevant in the abortion debate, but I think it's still an interesting topic. And the question whether the creation of a new DNA is is considered a new life, there's a lot of debate in the scientific community. The fact that it's a different being that's settled. We know that a new set of DNA is a new being, but the question of whether this being is alive, that's much more dividing in the scientific community.
Kay, do you want to respond to that at all?
Oh, I was just thinking that this is probably more of a conversation regarding the idea behind personhood than it is behind the idea of life. I think that whenever we're discussing abortion, we tend to conflate the two as meaning the exact same thing. And for somebody that is pro-choice, depending on how you are, what perspective you are arguing from, a lot of pro-choice people obviously do not see unborn human beings as persons. And so they see a separation between the idea of life and the idea of being a living person. For me, I kind of want to echo what Cindy said. Like, I don't think that this is an overwhelmingly large part of the abortion debate. I think that we kind of waste a lot of time whenever discussing the ethics of abortion on on this semantics argument of, well, is it a life? Is it alive? Is it a person? For me, I try to operate solely from the scientific standpoint. I don't like getting into philosophical arguments whenever arguing abortion. So for me, I kind of just stand solidly on life begins at fertilization. I don't really want to argue the ethics of considering some human beings to be persons and some human beings to not be persons.
I'm not really sure how to take that. Just because, like, you say you don't want to argue the philosophy, but I mean, that's kind of what we're doing, right?
The problem is, at some point we have to have this talk, because when deciding what law we should put in place, laws apply to biological entities. Like, we have laws to protect some certain animals. We have laws to defend trees also, or all those things. So we need to know that if we are making laws to protect embryos or fetuses, we need to know if they are considered a person, because a person in every country on earth has certain rights. And so we cannot we cannot separate this. Well, we can separate them, but still, we at some point we have to talk about the personhood of the fetus.
See, I think that's interesting, because the category of person may have certain rights, but not all persons have the same rights. Wouldn't you agree?
Do you mean rights granted to you by like your government, or inherent rights, like humans?
Inherently, like not all persons inherently have the same rights, regardless of species.
Well, regardless of species, well, then yeah, like we don't offer the same rights to other animal species that we offer to humans.
Like, you can imagine that there's. I'm sorry. Go ahead.
Yeah, even among humans, depending on your age, you don't have the same rights.
Yeah, like there's rights for age groups. There's rights for ability groups. There's rights for the actions that you've taken, or the merit that you've achieved, right? So I mean, the category person isn't really telling me too much. I think that that's not really a useful category to convey moral concern.
Well, I would agree with you, and I think that especially from my perspective, the reason why I try to avoid having the personhood discussion in regards to abortion is the whole idea of granting personhood to specific groups of human beings has been something that has been actively weaponized by those in power to oppress specific groups of human beings throughout all of human history. So I believe that, yeah, we absolutely do need to have this discussion whenever you're talking about, are we going to have laws in place that are going to protect this specific class of human being? Like, we do need to have the conversation of, like, is this human being a person deserving of the rights that we grant in giving personhood? But for me, I feel like we as a human species have already had this discussion multiple times in the past, and whenever that discussion ends with, "No, we should not grant this specific group of human beings these protections that we grant to human persons," it has never ended well for that specific group of human beings.
So that is a good segue to my second little slide here. How do you define your moral community? And that's a little bit of a nebulous way of putting it. I kind of restated it a few times before I sent it to you guys, because the original way I said it was, what is your criteria for granting moral concern? Or, yeah, I think that's how I said it. But I wanted to take away the word concern, and it escapes me at the moment why I did that. But there was a good reason. But just if you could just work with that right there. What how do you define your moral community? What are the parameters for why you decide something has moral value, um, like a fetus or a cat or a person in a coma, right? Is there a criteria that you're using to define these things for both of you?
Yeah, to me, it's well-being.
Okay.
The basic, and I was talking about this a couple hours earlier. The basic component of society is freedom and duties, and freedoms end where well, your freedom ends up where the other person freedom starts. So that's the limit we need to have as a society. We need to be able to enjoy freedoms. We need to understand that those freedoms come with duties, but our freedoms need to have limitations, because as soon as they infringe on other people's freedom, then they need to be limited. So that's how I see the basics of morality for a society.
Okay.
I
Thank you.
would absolutely 100% agree with that. I've actually I think it interesting that you argue from that perspective, because I've actually argued from the pro-life perspective from that exact standpoint as well.
Hmm.
Well, that's going to be an interesting discussion, right?
So, well, well-being is the perspective, right? And so what is the disconnect then? Where are we not seeing eye to eye then? Where do you guys think it is?
In regards to how I can come at that from a pro-life perspective, and Cindy can come from it from a pro-choice perspective.
Right, right.
I would probably say that that where we don't see eye to eye is the idea that abortion, having access to abortion equals freedom. I think that whenever arguing from this perspective, you have to kind of intentionally not acknowledge the fetus as a person in order for this argument to withstand being a pro-choice being a pro-choice position.
Do you think that that's correct, Cindy, so far?
Yes.
Okay. So it really just boils down to the consideration of the fetus as a person or something that is getting moral consideration.
I think that no matter how we view the fetus, the mother's rights supersedes everything.
Hmm.
I think, and maybe we're going to talk about this later, but I think I see it very immoral to force a woman who doesn't want to go through 9 months of pregnancy to do this, considering the impact on health it has on them. That's that's the crux of my position.
How do you respond to that, Kay? That part, just that one
Um,
part.
just that one part. Well, because you did have the question of, whether or not nobody can deny that childbirth and pregnancy come with risk, and anybody that is trying to deny that is either being intentionally disingenuous or is just incredibly ignorant. Listen, I've gone through 2 pregnancies. Both of them had levels of risk. My pregnancy with my daughter was relatively high risk because of pre-existing health conditions that I have. Um, and it is important to acknowledge that those dangers do exist. Um, they are not like I feel like a lot of abortion support, and I'm not putting this on Cindy, but I have talked to a lot of abortion supporters that tend to like to blow the maternal mortality rate, especially here in the United States, out of proportion and make it seem like women are dropping dead at mass scales
I have a
from
slide for this while you talk. Just
pregnancy and
keep going.
childbirth
Keep going. I'm gonna
complications.
put it up.
Um, and while it is important to acknowledge that these deaths do happen, we do also have to acknowledge that they are not happening at the rate that a lot of abortion supporters want them to believe. And we also have to acknowledge that leading health officials have gone on the record saying that majority of these deaths are preventable and they are caused by medical malpractice. Doctors and medical staff not acknowledging problems early enough and diagnosing them and treating them the proper way is what is overwhelmingly leading to these deaths.
I totally agree with this. On the other hand, we also know that removing access to abortion makes the death rate of women much higher than it needs to be if we allow abortion. And that's the numbers are there as well. We know that every time a country allows abortion, there is a significant drop in death of mothers, of death of children, and that doesn't take into account the cases where women will try to get an abortion no matter what and no matter how safe the procedure is, which also contains risks. So, and then there's the problem of the children, which we'll be able probably to talk about later. But in any case, yeah, I just come back to what I said earlier. I think it's immoral to force a woman to go through not only the pregnancy but also raising the child if they don't want to.
Well, I will agree with you that we can't be forcing parental. We don't force parents to keep children after they're born either way. I believe that adoption and surrender should absolutely be an option for people that do not want to continue to raise that child. I know that statistics show that women that carry to term, even if they originally have the intention of giving their child up for adoption, we see an overwhelming amount of women choosing to keep their children after they have the baby. But I in no way support taking away the option of surrendering your parental rights even before childbirth takes place. I think that that's extremely important. I think having things like baby drop boxes are also extremely important in giving resources to women that are in less than ideal situations that need to simply drop that child off safely to somebody else and walk away and have nothing else to do with it.
Yeah,
Right.
I agree that adoption should be easy, should be well, basically everything you said I agree with, uh, except that I never know how to express this, but having a child is in 100% of the cases is a selfish desire. It's the person wants to have a child, uh, and they have them. It's never the case that I'm going to make the idea is even weird to express. It's not like I want to have a child because it will be a gift for him, you know. And so because of that, I I have a hard time accepting that people would force children to be born in conditions that we know are already uh, leading to uh, potentially very very bad outcomes. We know that, especially in the U.S., but in pretty much everywhere on Earth, adoptions are very complicated. We know that foster care systems are not always very good. We know that leads to a lot of suffering for the children. And when they're adults, that crime raises. It has a lot of negative impact on the person, but also on the society. So forcing a child to be born inside or with the worst cards possible in life, I think I think that's bad.
I totally get what you're saying. In fact, that argument is part of what has moved me. I wouldn't say off of the pro-choice side, but it has given me an empathy with the pro-life side, and given me, I would say, a sense of agreement with the anti-abortion for a moral argument. Um, I'm not pronouncing that. I'm not saying that rightly. But anyways, um, the fact that you're forcing the child to be born, it extends back as far as existence, right? You're actually forcing the child to exist in the first place, and so you have to extend that to the idea that the embryo's existence, when you terminate it, you're taking away. Gosh, it's so difficult. I see why you struggle to put into words, but yeah, Tyler Bluntman, his debate with somebody on MDD, it changed my perspective on this. But I now say that there is immorality in abortion because you are forcing the embryo to exist. And because you have forced the embryo to exist, you now have some kind of incumbent duty to that embryo. But that is more complicated by the consent of whether or not you allowed your body to create that embryo in the first place. Sorry.
No, I totally understand what you're getting at, and I tell people all the time whenever I'm debating abortion, this is an incredibly complex thing to discuss because there is absolutely nothing on earth that is comparable to pregnancy. There is no situation on earth, there's no analogy that you can give that perfectly perpetuates the relationship between mother and child in utero. And that does make this an incredibly unique situation that whenever we're discussing this, we're trying to make it analogous to other laws that we have or other situations where this could potentially be one human relying on another, and none of this adds up to what pregnancy is, because essentially in all cases of an unplanned pregnancy or an unwanted pregnancy, you have two human beings in the situation that did not ask to be there, and if they had the option, they would probably rather not be there. I mean, if an embryo had the cognizant ability to say, like, yeah, I don't want to be a burden on somebody else. And a woman, obviously, when an unwanted pregnancy is in a situation she also does not want to be in. So that does make it incredibly complex and complicated to have a discussion on, because I don't disagree with you on the idea of trying to force someone to do something that they don't want to do is something that we as a society can agree is like don't do that. Don't try to force people to do things that they don't want to do. But this is also a life or death situation for another human being, and 100% of the time, whenever you're discussing having an abortion, two human beings go in, and only one of those human beings comes out, and 100% of the time, it is the smaller, more defenseless human being that is sacrificed in this situation.
Yeah, the difference between you and me is that I don't consider a fetus a human being. It's a potential human being, but it's not a human being. It's like comparing an acorn and a tree. It's potential, but it's not the same thing.
Right. And I don't know if I ever answered my last slide, but my criteria for extending moral consideration, or what I consider part of my moral community, are things that have the potential for moral reciprocity, which would include fetuses. The reason why I have to include things with potential is so that I can include things like people in comas, people who are mentally ill, who are seeking treatment, people who are abuse victims, all the people who are not capable of reciprocating morally with me right now, but could in the future. What do you think of that?
Even under that definition, I don't understand how you can make the equivalence between someone in the coma and someone and the fetus. The person in the coma is a person. They have personhood. They have a past. They have a life. I don't know how you can compare the two.
Well, I mean, it's not a direct comparison. It's an analogy. But the person in a coma, whatever personhood they have, it's in suspense. It's not relevant to the now. That person is in the past, and right now they are, for all intents and purposes, a vegetable. So I'd have no immediate reason to give them any kind of moral consideration. They can't do anything for me as far as moral reciprocating, and I have no information, no evidence that they ever will necessarily. But if there's any potential that they will in the future be able to reciprocate morally, then I may have some reason to. That's just what I've come to start thinking now. But I mean, there may be reasons to reject that model. But I mean, also, like, a person who is maybe they have some kind of emotional personality disorder, like borderline personality disorder, something like that, right? They are a compulsive liar. They don't morally reciprocate. Usually they lie, they cheat, they steal, right? There are reasons to not morally reciprocate with them. Maybe I want to lock them up forever. Maybe I want to throw away the key. Maybe I want all kinds of horrible things to happen to them, except that there's a chance that they could be rehabilitated. And so I should extend some kind of moral reciprocity to them.
I never heard this position before. I need to think about it because I never heard of it.
I mean, it's not totally original at all, but it is, like, me thinking things through. But I just think that, but this is not to say that abortion should be illegal. This is just to say that there is some moral value to fetuses. But just because there's some moral value to a sociopath with a knife to your throat doesn't mean you shouldn't kill them. Right? I mean, they're trying to kill you. That's my point. I mean, just because you have some moral reciprocity for something doesn't mean that you don't have the right to defend yourself.
So in your framework, does that also mean, like, based on that way of thinking, are you 100% against capital punishment?
100%. No, I'm not 100% against it, but I am against it. But that's because there is some potential there. Emotionally, viscerally, yeah, I would want certain people to die, right? But philosophically, no, I think that people should be used for their potential, quote unquote. Um, Especially people who have forfeited their rights as far as um, acts against other people. Um, and of course, the preponderance of evidence on that needs to be extraordinarily high. But yeah, like I, yeah. Okay. Should we move to the next prompt, or do you have more interaction with that idea?
Just one last question. What inside your framework? What's your position on dying with dignity?
On dying with dignity, I think that it's a good thing, but it needs to be something that is consented to. Me and Kay actually had a debate on this. We thought we were going to disagree vehemently, but we ended up agreeing a lot. But yeah, as long as it just has to be something that's fully informed consent, and then it's just a choice that person can make.
Okay.
So, what is your criteria for ending life? This kind of goes back to your question you just asked me about dying with dignity. I'm going to let you guys answer it first.
Go ahead, Kay.
I would kind of really echo what Kaz said here. I mean, I think that morally I am opposed to the ideas of euthanasia and assisted suicide overwhelmingly because we've seen those systems abused to take the life of people who have not consented to the ending of their life. So whenever you're talking about, having a criteria of whenever it's morally okay to end a life, it is that inherent consent that you have from the individual being affected by that action.
Yeah, I agree with both of you. I have a very specific view on death penalty, for example. I am opposed to it practically because right now there are too many possibilities for error, and we cannot make an error on this. But there could be some kind of justice system organization that could remove all those errors, and in that case, I would be in favor of death penalty, but not because not with the purpose of revenge, because that's never a good thing. It's just we should think about protect the society from individuals, and so when an individual is too dangerous for the society, and we have evidence that that won't change, then in this case we should remove this person from the society. So it means that we need to find a way to be sure that this person will never change, and that they will be forever a danger to the society. So it's very, very theoretical, which means for all intents and purposes, I'm against death penalty.
Okay. Yeah, I think we'll just go ahead to the next one because I think I already gave my position. So, what do you think is the most significant factor leading to the demand for abortion?
Lack of societal support, family support, friend support, just lack of support. Pregnant people do not have the support needed in society in order to carry out pregnancies that were not planned for.
Lack of support is what you said, right?
Lack of support from society, lack of support from family and friends, just a complete lack of a support system in order to feel safe and secured to continue on with a pregnancy that was not planned.
Cindy, do you want to contend with that, or do you agree with it? I did try to look this up to get a factual answer for this, and the answers that I got were too nebulous to try to contend. So I'm going to accept that.
Yeah, I don't want to say this, but I don't care. I mean, the reason why a woman wants to have an abortion is irrelevant to me.
Interesting. Go ahead. What? So why is it not relevant?
Because in the framework I exposed earlier, that to me it's immoral to force a woman to have a pregnancy and potentially raise the child. In this case, the reason why the mother doesn't want to be pregnant, it's irrelevant whether it's malfunction of contraception, whether it's you suddenly lose your job and you can't afford to have the pregnancy, whether it's you find that the fetus has a malformation, whether it's irrelevant to me.
So, I mean, just to give you an extreme example to push back on that, if let's say that there were women that were literally just getting pregnant to stay pregnant all the way till 9 months, just so that they could have a late term abortion, just for the thrill of it, literally just so they could say, I killed a fetus right before it was about to be born. Just, I know it's ridiculous, I know, but just hypothetically speaking, would you have a problem with that reason?
I have a problem with late abortions when they're not required by the protection of the health of the mother. I mean, in every single country on the planet that allows abortion, late-term abortion is forbidden, except in the cases where the child or the mother are at risk. So, as I said earlier, rights have limits. So we can allow abortions for I mean, in France it's 21 weeks, in other countries it's 20, in the UK for example it's 20, and that seems reasonable to me because it gives the mother enough time to know that she's pregnant, to understand what it means, to make a decision about this. And we have to put limitations. So late-term abortions should be, in my opinion, illegal, except in the case of death threat for the mother or the child. And the reason why I think that it's because at some point between week 21 and let's say week 25, we don't deal with the fetus anymore. We don't know exactly where the limit is, and probably we cannot set a finite limit because every mother is different, every pregnancy is different, so the rate at which the fetus grows is different. But at some point, the fetus becomes a future child. Yeah.
Yeah.
I wanted to ask you, kind of going back to what you said about, it's irrelevant why women choose to get abortion. Do you think that, like, as a whole, we should just stop asking that question? Like, we should stop gathering data on what the reasons are behind why women get abortions and what those driving reasons are?
I don't mind gathering information about it, but I don't see what kind of justification we could implement to take care of that, because let's say tomorrow we put in place a law that says you cannot have what we call comfort abortion. Then a woman doesn't want to have a child. Well, assuming that comfort abortion is precisely defined in the law, uh, and we can argue about this if it's money issues, is it comfort, is it all those questions. But you cannot be sure of the real reason the mother will want to have an abortion. So making a law to say no, you can't abort for this specific reason, that will never work.
No, I agree with you. That would be a much too complex system. I think that the real reason, or for at least for me, I can't speak to as to why the United States government or any government gathers information as to why women have abortions. But for me personally, I like to know why women have abortions because if we address the underlying reason why women have abortions, you bring the abortion rate down. Now, overwhelmingly, we don't see the government doing anything in regards to actually trying to bring the abortion rate down. But for me, I think that would be the only important facet to remember whenever we're talking about the the driving reasons why women get an abortion because I think that it is important as a society that we are even if you're arguing from a pro-choice stance that you think the abortion should still be legal, I think the majority of pro-choice people would also argue that we should be putting help and assistance in place for pregnant people so they don't feel to need to have abortions that they don't absolutely 100% want to have.
I totally agree. And in an ideal world, we will need to have abortions.
So, like, I kind of want to, I kind of largely agree with what Sydney said about she doesn't care, right? And I want to put it like to you like this, Kay. Um, Infidelity, cheating, right? It's immoral. Can we all agree to that? Is there ever a moral reason to cheat on your significant other?
No.
Right. I mean, so, but does anybody here want to make it illegal to cheat on your spouse? No. Okay. So we all can agree that there's a distinction between what should be illegal versus what is obviously immoral, right? So
True.
whether or not, regardless of the reason, whether it's a good reason or a bad reason, moral or immoral, for the abortion, the legal question is a totally separate thing. Can we all agree to that?
Yes.
Okay.
Yeah.
So the question is, what is the rights of the people involved? Right? And then now we're back to the square one.
Yeah.
And
Yeah.
now we're back to square one about the personhood or the moral concern of the fetus.
Mhm.
So, is childbirth a threat to the mother's life?
It can be. But
Yeah.
I agree with what Kay said earlier. Uh, Even if the United States rate is higher than any country in Europe, I I don't think it should be used either way uh, to argue for or against abortion.
Yeah, I agree. I take issue with this being used as an argument to prop up abortion. We see it a lot here in the US because abortion is not a solution to the high maternal mortality rate. I mean, if more women are having they're carrying pregnancies to term, obviously that's going to cause a higher maternal mortality rate because more women are going through pregnancy and childbirth. But overwhelmingly like these complications are happening to wanted pregnancies. These complications are happening when you're birthing a wanted child. So abortion is not a solution to our high maternal mortality rate. It is just yet another example of society trying to use abortion as a band-aid solution to a much larger problem, because we've had abortion legal for 50 years nationwide here, and we still have an abnormally high maternal mortality rate for a developed country. And that's because abortion doesn't solve women dying giving birth to very wanted children.
Yes, the only case where we should take into consideration the this rate compared to abortion or no abortion is the case where um, abortion is denied in the case of dangerous pregnancy. Because in this case, the abortion, the lack of abortion is directly the cause of the death of the mother. But other than that, I totally agree with you.
Right. So you're saying that in a country where there is no abortion, then the high mortality rates are a direct result of lack of abortion.
She's talking about what we refer to here in the United States as ectopic pregnancies. These are pregnancies that cannot be carried to term and will absolutely result in the death of the person carrying it if it's not solved. We see a lot of misinformation here in the U.S. in regards to the removal of ectopic pregnancies, because here in the United States, in our medical system, it is not considered an abortion to remove an ectopic pregnancy. But due to having so much misinformation surrounding that procedure, in our anti-abortion laws that have passed so far here in separate states in the United States, there has to be specific clauses in those laws that state that doctors can still continue to perform the procedure to remove an ectopic pregnancy, even in the state where abortion is no longer legally acceptable.
Yeah, and I think there are other cases, like for example, when the the fetus dies during the pregnancy, it should be able to remove it and not forced to, like it's been the case several times. The mother has to carry a dead child until birth, because it's not really a birth. There is also the case of incest and rape, which, in my opinion, I don't understand how anyone can be against those cases. But other than that, yeah, I agree.
So I get what you guys are saying about that the high mortality rate doesn't really dictate what we should do as far as when a woman is pregnant or not. But the issue I have there is that regardless of how good our healthcare gets or anything else, having a baby will still be inherently dangerous. There will still be some mortality rate. And unless that mortality rate drops below the mortality rate for abortion, it will still be a mathematically justified calculus to say, I want to get an abortion versus carry this childbirth to term. It will still be logical.
Yeah, someone in the chat just answered your comment. Snake was right. He says, but the high mortality rate makes it so risky that it should be a healthcare decision to terminate a pregnancy. Right. And that's what you're saying, and I agree with that.
Yeah, that's kind of what I'm trying to get to there. It's just that this is an inherently dangerous thing that we can't really escape that. And I'm just wondering why UK specifically don't want people to have that option to take it to end that pregnancy.
Unfortunately, this is going to circle us back to square one, because whenever you are looking at it from the perspective of a pregnancy involving two equal human beings with equal value and equal dignity and equal rights, then in this situation, it is a situation that is dangerous for both human beings, and we are choosing death for one of those human beings.
Okay.
We can argue that pregnancy can be unsafe for women, and there is a statistical chance of the woman dying during pregnancy and childbirth. But you can also say that the unborn human being dies in an abortion 100% of the time.
So perhaps maybe there's some sort of philosophical order of operations that
Well,
we're
I
doing.
operate under a very, very simple, like, this is what I always argue. My perspective is that a pregnancy involves two human beings. It should be our goal to protect and preserve the life of both of those human beings until it is no longer medically possible to do so. And then you have to choose the human being that has the higher statistical chance of survival, which is always going to be the mother.
Interesting. See, the reason why I can't look at the mother and the embryo as equal is because the mother is currently capable of moral reciprocity, while the embryo is only potential moral reciprocity in my framework. And there's still a potential that the embryo will be a negative moral reciprocity or something else entirely, like future Hitler. So there's always that. So
Yeah, then you get into those hypothetical debates. It's like, would you kill baby Hitler if you could go back in time?
oh no, I wouldn't change. I wouldn't alter this time space continuum. So
I wouldn't kill the baby, but I might force the mother to have an abortion.
anything you do is going to create a paradox and unmake yourself.
Yeah,
Destroy the
And get
universe.
sucked into a black hole.
So, yeah, equal. Cindy, any way that you want to attack the idea of equal personhood there?
Yes, there's the idea that while the mother can decide to request for an abortion or not, the fetus can't have this decision because it's not capable of making it. It's not capable of saying I want to live or I want to die. It a fetus cannot be considered a full human being because otherwise you have to provide the fetus the same rights as a human being, uh, child support or insurance or those kind of things. If uh, you can't have it both ways. You can say this is a human being, but it only has some specific rights compared to other human beings. I think yeah, I don't see how you can say that a person who exists, who grew up, has memories, and has family, uh, has ideas, has functioning brain, is the same as and I still talk in the framework of abortion until 21 weeks. It's the same as something this size and who doesn't have capability to think. I don't see how you can make the case that those are identical.
I think I like that you brought up the idea of like trying to play both sides of it. You do have pro-lifers who say like this is a fetus, this is a person, this is a living human being, but we don't acknowledge them in any other context of society as being human beings. And I'm pro-life, but I'm also very progressive in my political and social views, and I am 100% behind ideas like starting child support at the moment that you have a positive pregnancy test, requiring the other participating human being, the father of this child, to be an active participant in providing for that child and sustaining that child's life throughout not just throughout pregnancy but afterwards, and requiring them to take part in either relinquishing their rights or taking part in actively sustaining a quality of life for that human being after birth. And I don't disagree with you that we do have a lot of pro-life people that kind of talk out of both sides of their mouth in regards to that, because they don't want to acknowledge that personhood of the fetus that they grant it to outside of the parameters of, oh, you just can't kill them.
Yeah. Yeah, I don't agree with your position, but I think it is very coherent as opposed to other pro-life people.
Trust me, I beat my head against the wall on a daily basis towards other pro-life people.
Yeah, I can imagine that.
I guess the thing that it gets to me is that we're talking about the legality, right? We're talking about what is allowed or disallowed by law, and that means we're shaping the rights of the American citizens. Because, well, I mean, well, Cindy's not in America. Sorry, Cindy. But whatever country that you may happen to be in, the citizens of your country, right? So we're saying the mothers they're obviously citizens, right? Are the babies citizens, the fetuses? I mean, living
Objectively, as of
beings are
now,
well, I mean, living beings have rights. It doesn't matter if you're a citizen or not. An illegal immigrant can cross the border and still have the right to not be shot in the head. I mean, hypothetically, anyways. I hope.
I don't
But
know, the Supreme Court just ruled that we can't sue Border Patrol agents for violating our Fourth Amendment rights, so.
I mean, that's a whole other discussion. I guess. But hypothetically, a living thing should still have some kind of right, regardless of citizenship. But still, citizenship conveys a certain level of rights that are at least higher than just being a living thing. I mean, a living thing is also a potato plant, so doesn't tell us much.
Yeah, I understand where you're coming from, and I think, like, for me, the idea of granting the rights of being a citizen to unborn humans would actually help us in making an effort to correct a lot of those underlying issues why women get abortions in society. If women can start collecting assistance on their unborn child before that child is actively here, as somebody that went through the welfare system, having children on the American welfare system, can tell you that if I had been able to start the process of collecting assistance for my children before they were here, it would have been a heck of a lot easier, and I would have had way more resources at my disposal once they were actually on the other side of the birth canal. It's a small effort, but I believe that that would be a step in the right direction. If we are going to grant personhood to fetuses by saying you are not allowed to abort them, then it needs to go all the way and in acknowledging that an unborn human being in the United States is a citizen before birth, and that women should be able to collect the assistance afforded to them currently by the state for that unborn child, the same that they do for born children.
So I'm ready to pounce on that, but I don't know if Cindy's ready to pounce on it too.
No, I think it makes sense.
Okay, so I disagree.
No, I mean, it could make sense if we looked into all the implications of this, because that's just one example that makes sense, but it may not make sense in other area. Like, for example, can I buy an insurance for my fetus, and if something happens to it, then I collect the insurance? Is that possible? There are thousands of situations like this that we don't think about because we're not lawyers, and that would impact the society as a whole. So, although this example that you mentioned makes sense, I'm skeptic overall.
So you're aware of how commonplace miscarriages really are, right?
Yeah, of course.
Right. So, I mean, they're mostly idiopathic. We don't even try to figure out what's going on with all of those, right? But once we do that, people are going to start trying to figure out what's going on with all those. And we're going to find some answers. And the mothers are going to be responsible for some of those.
It is an unfortunate reality. I mean, I've had several miscarriages myself, and I think that overwhelmingly women who suffer miscarriages, they go through that kind of cycle of guilt of wondering, is it something that I did? Is it
Well,
something that I drank? Is it something that I ate? Did I pick up something that's too heavy? Like, yeah, that is a factor. It's just a fact of the matter that it does happen.
I mean, once we start getting the science, and once those studies start rolling in, it's going to create an incumbency on all the mothers to start doing much less. I mean, we're saying that we're going to create a class system for women in pregnancy where they're not allowed to do anything. They're going to be relegated to bed rest just on the off chance because of correlating factors, just because something is possibly going to cause a miscarriage. And if the science shows that that's something that causes miscarriages more often than not, and then they do it, then they'll be arrested and or charged or whatever the fines are. I mean, we're talking about really just putting women in a position where they're damned if they do, damned if they don't, constantly.
Because of granting citizenship to the fetus.
Mm-hmm.
Well,
I think so.
I think that if you look at like you have to look at it within the parameters of because this goes back to my earlier argument of talking about how pregnancy is an entirely unique situation. You know, there's absolutely nothing like it on the planet, so we can't regulate the idea of a fetus being a person the same way that we regulate people that are not connected to each other. I think that the only thing that you could really logically compare it to, and even this is not a steady comparison, would be Siamese twins. These are two people that are connected to each other through no fault of their own. Both of them have equal rights and are equally deserving of rights, and how you would deal with that situation as a whole. But even then, it's not completely comparable because the unborn human is entirely inside the other human. They have no ability to function outside of the internal space of that other human. Um, so that does make it, like I said, it makes it incredibly complex to regulate this because there is no situation like it on planet Earth. So whenever it comes to making laws and creating, a society built around acknowledging the personhood of a fetus, it's going to be incredibly different than how we acknowledge the personhood of any other person because the location of that person.
But despite this, you still think that a fetus has the same value as a person.
Yes.
I mean, I think that when a when a when two adults engage in intercourse with informed consent and that results in a pregnancy, then there is an incumbency to see that pregnancy to term. But that sentence there is a very complex sentence because informed consent is a very nebulous term that entails a lot of things. And I don't think that I would say that a huge percentage of the sex that goes on in our country today is not with informed consent, at least not in a true sense. I was reading some. I wish I had the Facebook post pulled up for me right now. The rumors that go around with kids about sex, like if you have sex in a hot tub or standing up or you can't get pregnant, like that's not informed consent. If you think that, then you're not informed, and so how can you consent?
Our
Right?
poor sex education system here in the United States.
Yeah, I mean these are things that the kids having sex are thinking these things. They're kids, right? These are children with this kind of mentality, and they're having sex and they're having kids, and then they're being told you have to have these other kids and raise them, and then it's just perpetually going on and on and on. So if you don't have informed consent, then now you're stuck raising this other being inside of you you never consented to have inside of you. And I think that in that situation you have a right to expel the interloper, but that doesn't necessarily mean that the interloper has to die. Unfortunately, it is a fact of reality in our current state of medical affairs that when we do expel the interlopers, they do die. But I think that we should be able to, if we could come together on this issue and come to some kind of happy medium here, we could actually push the medical community and the legislators to change that. We don't have to have abortions and death. We can have abortions. I think that I think that me and Cindy are on the side of women should be allowed to expel the interlopers at will, and you are on the side of don't kill the fetus. And if we can all see eye to eye on those points, we can make a legislation that reflects that.
No, I don't disagree with you. I think that there is a little bit of disagreement amongst abortion supporters on the idea of like simply having the right to expel the fetus, because I've had hypothetical conversations with abortion supporters, like talking about, we're in very, very, very early stages of having external wombs. The potential technology of removing a pregnancy from somebody's body and putting it in an external womb to gestate, um, very, very early stages. We might see it in our lifetime. That would be great. But there are people that are on the pro-choice side that disagree with the idea that once we have the technology to be able to do that, that a woman should not still have the option of having having an abortion, having the life inside her terminated. 100% on board with the idea of removing the unwanted pregnancy if that does not result in the death of that human being. And I think you would probably be pretty hard pressed to find a pro-lifer that would stand against making legislation like that if it were to come down to that ultimatum. I know that there are a lot of pro-life people, particularly more far-right religious people, that have a personal opposition to the idea of artificial wombs because of X, Y, and Z. But if it came down to the legislation of having to choose between keeping abortion legally accessible or giving women the option of removing the pregnancy safely and keeping that human being alive, I think that that is a common ground, a middle ground that a lot of pro-life and pro-choice people can absolutely meet on.
It's yeah, it's complicated because on one hand, on an emotional side, I totally agree with this. I would love for abortion not to mean the death of the fetus, but practically, the idea of putting a 6-week fetus in an incubator. I mean, whose child is it until it's 9 months? Until it's supposed to be born. That raises a lot of questions, and I mean, it would be an interesting debate. It's indeed a lot of questions to be asked. I agree, but I'm not sure we are ready as a society to ask those questions, and more importantly, to answer them rational.
I don't disagree with you. I think that as society overwhelmingly probably isn't ready for the conversations that we have surrounding abortions. And I think that's why it's been such a contentious and hot button issue for as long as it has, because overwhelmingly people they're not prepared to have these conversations. They are incredibly complex and they're incredibly difficult to have. And it really causes you to question like a lot of the roots of why you believe the things that you do and why society functions the way that it does. And of course, societies are different. American society is different than the society that you exist in. And so this isn't going to be a one-size-fits-all thing anyway. Every country, every region is going to have to address these issues separately for their own individual cultures, which just complicates the issues and then compounds it even more because we have to come up with so many different solutions to the exact same problem.
I see your point, Cindy. I think that in the same way, these questions do need to be asked and answered and addressed thoughtfully, but I don't think that it should stop us from taking the step necessarily. In the same way that I don't think that abortion not being a solution to the high mortality rate should stop us from allowing women to have that option because of the high mortality rate. You know what I mean? Just because of a hypothetical future that alleviates the problem doesn't mean that we shouldn't address the reality now. You know what I mean?
Yeah. Yeah.
Yeah, I think that's where I want to leave that. Go ahead.
Kay, can I ask you, are you a religious person?
I am not. I am a formally religious person. I grew up in fundamental Christianity. I now identify as a pagan. I'm also an omnist, but I usually just tell people I'm agnostic.
Okay.
You're not pagan anymore?
No, I am. I am. But even I think a lot of people have a misconception that paganism means that you acknowledge a specific like higher power. You can be pagan and not acknowledge, not work with or worship any deities, which is what I choose to do, because of very very specific religious trauma that I suffered at the hands of my fundamental evangelical church. I choose not to acknowledge a deity, so I think that there's a lot of misconceptions around what paganism is and what pagans believe, and so I just tend to tell people, like, I'm agnostic because I'm not gonna go into my 20-minute spiel about what it is that I actually believe.
Just make a whole long video and just tell them click the link.
Yeah, the reason why I ask this is, do you think that your previous beliefs have an impact or a source in your current position on abortion?
I get asked this question a lot, and the reason why I say no is because whenever I first started in pro-life activism, I still identified as a Christian. I was very, very traditional in my beliefs. And throughout the years that I've been in activism, I've kind of taken this journey through my political views, through my religious affiliation, did a lot of deconstructing and kind of just completely rebuilding myself as a person, because I grew up in what you could essentially call a cult. And whenever I was going through my deconstruction with my religion and realizing that everything that I had grown up believing I didn't believe anymore, and was having to completely reconstruct what it is what I believed about our existence entirely, the only opinion that I had that did not change, even in the slightest, was my pro-life opinion, my pro-life beliefs. It's the only stance that I've had that has remained constant throughout my entire shift from being a far right Christian Republican to where I am now as a pagan agnostic leftist. And that was throughout completely tearing down every idea that I had in regards to religion.
Okay, thanks.
Well, I think we should just go ahead and get through these questions. What do you guys think?
Sounds good.
Sure.
All right. So, Titan Uranus says, our foster/adoption system is overwhelmed now.
Yes, yes, it is, and it absolutely needs to change. And I think that the pro-life community really needs to do a better job of not just using the foster care system and the adoption system as options as a talking point. We talk all the time about how the foster care system needs to be reformed, but we're not doing shit about it. People need to be more angry about this. They need to be more upset about this because not only is our foster care system completely overwhelmed, but children are suffering in these environments. They're being abused, they're being harmed, and more people need to be angry and more people need to be speaking out. And this needs to be a bigger issue that people are drawing attention to.
Yes, and as I said earlier, this issue has an impact on the entire society, because those kids who grew up in those environments have a higher tendency to be criminals. So
Criminals, sex trafficked, all kinds of horrible things.
yeah, so you protect the entire society by fixing. Well, you protect more, a little bit more, the entire society by solving this foster care issue.
How do you solve it though?
I don't think that it's just this is how we solve it. I think that there's going to it's a super super complex issue. I've talked with people. I've had private conversations with people about it in the past. Uh it's a very very complex thing. I think that there are multiple things that we need to be doing. But I could spiel about that for an hour.
Yeah. Okay. Sorry. Titan Uranus also says, also, most of the kids that go missing in this country disappear from foster care, and social services are overwhelmed with abuse reports.
Yeah, I think we
Yeah.
kind of already talked about that.
Yeah.
He says, we're already heading towards third world, hate that term, country status. Ending women's bodily autonomy will be the final nail in that coffin.
I don't even know how to respond to that.
I did see a study from Duke University today that showed they did a analysis that in their results showed that women's mortality rates in birth would go up by up to 33% if we outlawed abortion. So just putting that out there. From Titan Uranus also says, we're already, oh, sorry, I read that one. Snake Rose Wright says, fetuses aren't necessarily people.
I mean, this kind of goes back to the philosophical circular discussion on personhood. I mean, I think that whenever we're talking about that, the idea of personhood, it's something that could be argued in circles to the end of time. That's why it's a philosophical argument.
Regarding if there's a moral example of cheating in your significant other. Sure, there is. Maybe your spouse is abusive and you're trapped in the marriage.
Yeah, that's when we were talking about when you
Yeah.
asked us if cheating was immoral, and that's why I wasn't too keen to say yes. It's because it's more complicated than a yes or no question, in my opinion.
I would
Yeah.
say, I would argue that here's the way that I look at it. You make certain promises, you take certain vows whenever you get married. It's kind of a universal thing, having vows at your wedding. And whenever you violate those vows, I do believe that there is a level of you get to a point in marriage, if there is abuse happening, actual abuse happening, then that is a violation of the code of marriage. And if there is abuse taking place, then that spouse has already violated. Sorry, the word just flew out of my head. I'm sorry. My iron levels are very, very low
The
today.
code of
Yeah. And therefore I see a person engaging in sexual activity or whatever you consider to be a violation of their marriage vows, as kind of null and void in that situation because that code of conduct has already been violated.
Yeah, I was gonna say something like that too, but I would, just to be charitable, I would say like he's right, just because like technically, but yeah, I agree with you wholeheartedly there. Like once there are certain things that you can do, like the relationship is over. You can quote unquote be in the relationship, but the relationship is really over.
Because it just ceases to be a relationship once it becomes abusive.
Yeah, I agree mostly with what Kay said, but I would extend it to any relationship, not just not just marriages. As soon as you enter in a relationship with someone, there should be a moment where you decide of a social contract you will have with this person. And as soon as this social contract that is mutually agreed upon is violated, then this is what we would call cheating.
All right. Okay. Where am I? Sorry. This guest was already dressed, so I should skip that. We already addressed this. I still want to read this. I'm sorry. Dean Kruger said the interesting question is: if you were pregnant with baby Hitler, would you abort? Did we address that?
We did kind of address that.
But did we answer that specific question? If you were pregnant with baby Hitler, would you abort it?
In this hypothetical, it's like, okay, so I know that my child is going to grow up and kill a bunch of people, and I have absolutely zero control over that. Like, I have no choice in how my child grows up. Like, it doesn't make any sense. No, I wouldn't abort a human being that has done nothing wrong because you told me that 30 years from now he's going to kill 60 million Jews.
Sorry, Nav. Okay. Snake was right says, but the high mortality rate makes it so risky that it should be a healthcare decision to terminate pregnancy.
Yeah, we kind of already talked about that.
I'm sorry, but my cat just brought a mouse in the apartment. Can you just give me a few seconds to deal with this?
Sure. Yeah, take your time. In the meantime, let's see. We already read that one. But at what risk assessment level can you start making that decision? 100% chance of mother's imminent death, 99% chance, 50%. What risk assessment would you allow termination? 100% imminent mother death, 50%, 99%. How imminent? Within hours, days, months?
But we don't have to do that because pregnancy is a medical situation. We already have gauges for this for wanted pregnancies. We already go off of how to handle this care. If a woman is at risk or is having a complication, doctors treat it. And if the treatment goes to the point of unfortunately resulting in the death of her unborn child, that is something that is not only something that pro-lifers accept, it is something that is directly protected in pro-life law. Like, this isn't a conversation that we need to even have because we are already making these assessments during pregnancy.
No, Mango Tea, you cannot join. No. Let's see. We asked that question and that one. In the case of consensual sex, should the biological father have a say in the decision of whether or not to carry the pregnancy to term, since abortion is a reality? Looking for an answer from both. Did you hear that, Cindy?
Yes.
Good.
I mean, I don't really think that I feel like this is probably more a question for Cindy because from my pro-life perspective, I don't believe that either one of them should have a say in ending the life of that human being. So,
good point.
Yeah, since the pregnancy only impacts the health of the mother, only her should have the ability to say yes or no, and the biological father shouldn't have a say in this.
Do I want to answer this question? No, the biological father should not have a say in ending the pregnancy at all. The biological father should have a say in ending his rights, but he should have that say before she gets pregnant. That's what I think. Snake was right. Which Siamese twin would we choose to save if we had to cut one off? The more aware one.
yeah, but like in that situation, it's kind of like what I was talking about earlier, we have two human beings, and it should be our goal to preserve the life of both human beings. And if it's no longer, if we have to choose between the two of them, then yeah, we choose the one that has the statistically higher chance of survival. It's always going to be the woman because the unborn child cannot survive, and up until a certain point. And then whenever we are at a point in pregnancy where the fetus is viable, then we don't have situations where we have to choose one or the other.
Yeah, in the case of the Siamese brothers, I think Kay's solution is the solution. You save the one who has the most chances to survive.
All right. And from empathy and respect, thank you so much for the love, brother. From Snake was right. Back to the fetus discussion. Just define person, and then we can see if a stage of a fetus meets it.
I'm pretty sure just like my definition of a person is a human being.
Interesting. I would actually include some animals in person.
But where would you draw the line there though?
So, like, I guess for me, that definition of moral reciprocity and potential, that's my definition of person, I guess. Because like I want to include any sentient artificial intelligence that might arise in the future. I want my definition to cover all bases of anything that could like if a freaking plant started talking to me tomorrow, I want my definition to include it.
Hey, I talk to my plants all the time.
But if it talks to me, that's the thing.
But maybe you could make the distinction between individual and person, because individual fits your description, whereas person has more a connotation of human being.
Right,
No.
exactly. I don't want a definition that is speciesist. You know, because you know eventually there will be some kind of artificial intelligence that is pretty close to person, if not actually a person, and they're going to want to be treated like a person. And if your moral framework doesn't have a way to accommodate that or at least address it, then you're just going to be having to rework the whole thing from the ground up again. And I don't want to do that. So Snake was right. Back. Oh, I already read that one. The last question: if the biological father does not have a say, should he then be held responsible financially, etc., for the child?
That's a very interesting question, because from a certain point of view, it seems unfair to not give him a say in continuing the pregnancy and at the same time making him liable for the child. I don't know what the law says, whether in the US or in France or Belgium, about this, but I would say that if the mother keeps a child when the biological father doesn't want it, that should be a case where the father shouldn't be liable. The problem comes when how do you prove it? Unless you have physical, like a text message or something like that, saying that I don't want this child, then it might be difficult in some cases to make the distinction. But yeah, I think in any case, if a man is in a relationship and the woman wants to keep the child and he doesn't, usually the couple breaks up. And so when the child is born, the mother is alone already. So I don't think this situation occurs in reality. I don't know. Kay, what do you think?
For me, My position is that fathers should have the exact same rights as the mothers do in my moral framework. So fathers cannot just they can't just up and skip town whenever she gets pregnant and just leave her to deal with it by herself. I am of the position that women should not be able to have abortions. They should not be able to kill that fetus. So the father should not be able to abandon the fetus. Now, if the parents decide that they want to relinquish their rights at birth, of course, I am 100% supportive of that. The purpose of being anti-abortion is preserving life, not trying to dictate how people live their lives. And so if he wants to relinquish his rights at birth the same as she does, then he has that equal rights to do so. But since she doesn't, since in my moral framework, she doesn't have the right to simply abandon the pregnancy, then neither does he. And it should be a requirement that they, to the as much of an extent as he possibly can, because obviously he can't go through the pregnancy, but they should have to go through the pregnancy together.
You know, it's interesting because there's still the firehouse option. You
Oh
know,
yeah, baby drop boxes, great thing.
so I mean, even if the mother decides that she wants to keep the pregnancy and go through the whole thing, even a couple of days, what is it, a couple months?
I think it depends on the state.
Yeah, definitely depends on the state, but I think like a couple of weeks is probably the average, right? Um, the mother can walk away from any responsibility whatsoever, free and clear, just by taking the baby to a firehouse or any designated location. Look it up. Don't just go dropping off your babies if you're watching this. Um,
Look for the drop boxes.
yeah. um, but that option is not available to any males anywhere.
Yeah.
That is an inequality, but I mean, there are many inequalities. It doesn't necessarily mean that it's a bad thing.
Yeah, there is biological inequality in the first place. But yeah, I said it earlier, Kay, but I like your position because it's coherent all over.
Well, I try to remain as consistent as possible. It's been like my driving goal in the 8 years that I've been doing activism is just I want to remain consistent, and it's honestly been anti-abortion activism that's driven me to that. It's arguing with pro-choice people to be like, that's logically inconsistent to your position. And I go back and I reevaluate and I do research on it. And I'm like, yeah, I'm being morally inconsistent here. Well, how can I make my position more consistent?
So I think if we're going to try to be as consistent as we can be, we're going to need to separate the idea of abortion from termination of life entirely and just say that these are two separate concepts. And when we are arguing for abortion, we're arguing for a legal right of women to have bodily autonomy. And we're arguing against the termination of life in certain respects. But I mean, when we are talking about legal rights to bodily autonomy, though, I do think that in the current reality of the mortality and the risk of pregnancy, I do think that if you're going to be consistent, that you do have to acknowledge that a woman should have some kind of right to end her pregnancy when there is a risk to her life. That's just
Yeah.
my opinion.
Yeah, I don't disagree with you there. And I mean we may disagree subjectively on this that, for me I feel like I'm being consistent because I do support women having legal access to life-saving medical care. And there are pro-lifers that unfortunately disagree with this position. Um, I think it's more just misinformation in the abortion debate than anything. But I do believe that if you've done what is medically possible to do to preserve both lives, and you've gotten to a point where you just can't anymore, you have to preserve the life that has the highest chance of living. Doctors need to be able to provide care for women who need it in order to save their lives.
So let's say you're governor of your state and you want to write a law about abortion, what would it look like?
I think that we have a couple of decent laws that have been written so far in the United States. I think that we've done a good job so far making sure to highlight these specific protections in pro-life law and making it very, very clear in these states of what is legally acceptable and what isn't. Removal of ectopic pregnancies whenever a new pro-life bill is announced that it's being rolled out. It's the first thing that I go in and look for. Like, do they have written out, that women have protections to remove ectopic pregnancies? Do they have it clearly written out that women need to have access to life-saving medical care? If that care does result in the death of her fetus, then it is unfortunate, but women need to have access to this. I think that having legal and civil protections to protect pregnant people who may seek or even carry out an abortion whenever it is illegal. I am not of the opinion that we should be putting these people in prison, or nor do I think that in the states where they are allowing for lawsuits to happen in cases of abortion, that pregnant people who are seeking them should be allowed to be sued either. So that's another thing that I absolutely look for in pro-life legislation, is making sure that pregnant people are given those legal protections in the law.
Interesting. Huh. Okay. Couple more questions just came in. I'm sorry, guys. If you can force a woman to carry a baby, can you force someone who's a perfect match to donate a kidney?
These are two situations that are not comparable to each other.
False equivalence, Titan Uranus. All right. And Mark Reed, isn't there always a risk to a woman's life, even if the risk is very, very low? I think that's at me. Yes. Let me just pull that thing up again. Yep. The deaths per capita for abortion were 0.41, and for live birth were 17.4 in 2018. That was the last year that I had a matching whole year's worth of data to look at and compare. So, yeah. And so that's all of our questions. I don't think we're going to take any more. I want to just say thank you to both of you. You guys want to have any last things to say real quick?
On this topic, no, I think we said pretty much everything. Again, I like that we were pretty close overall in our positions. I'm glad we were able to have this discussion and stay civil and cordial, and I really enjoyed it.
Definitely. Okay. Did you have anything you want to say real quick?
No, I just echo what Cindy said. I love whenever I can have respectful dialogue on abortion that doesn't result in insults and yelling at each other. I think that it's so much more productive, and I really, really enjoyed the conversation.
No, I definitely enjoyed it too. Thank you guys so much for coming on my channel and having this conversation with me. I just want to also thank Sideshow Nav and the moderators in the chat for helping me out with this. As always, thank you to anybody in the audience who showed up, everybody who sent questions and elevated the conversation. So like it if you loved it, share it if you want to spread it, and subscribe. The guests are linked in the description. Check them out. Do it now. Thank you to everyone. Have a great night. And remember, keep seeking truth from facts. Have a great night, everyone. And we are out.